You're listening to the Courageous Pivot podcast. This is a space where transformation begins and possibilities unfold from the heart. Whether you're standing at a crossroads or seeking clarity on when to trust your deepest instincts and take that life-changing leap, you're in exactly the right place. Get ready to unlock the courage, wisdom, and passion to turn challenge into opportunity. Your journey starts now. Welcome back once again to the Courageous Pivot podcast, the podcast where we explore bold, heart-led changes in work, life, and everything in between, even when it makes no logical sense but feels deeply right, or perhaps simply terrifyingly nauseating, but you also can't help stop thinking about it. I'm your host, Meghan Telpner, and I'm so glad you're here with me today for your ongoing commitment, support, encouragement, and love. I appreciate you very much. Today we're talking about how awesome it feels to be wrong. It doesn't feel good. It never feels good. But it's a really important topic to address as we think about pivots, because usually when we're pivoting, it's because we've somehow found ourselves on the path that is no longer in alignment. So let's dive into today's episode. If you've been following along on this journey, you know we've been diving into the stages of making heart-led pivots. We've talked about recognizing the whisper, tuning into your inner knowing, and sitting in that comfortable but necessary space of the unknown. You've also begun meeting some of my guests who have their own wisdom and experience to share. And today, I want to explore something that might sound a little contradictory at first, something that requires a particular kind of bravery that doesn't get much credit in our culture of certainty and confidence and taking sides. We live in an age where everyone believes themselves to be right at all times, seeking out that which firmly confirms their own bias. This is something I talked about in length with Sean Croxton. And we confirm our own bias even if it ultimately results in our own suffering. Put another way, well, we're talking about the sacred art of disillusionment, realizing we were wrong. Now, before you think I've gone completely dark, stick with me, because what I'm about to share might be the most liberating thing you hear today, and wouldn't that be lovely? I'll start with this. What if you're wrong about everything, including yourself? Now, this might not feel great at first, but what if it's the ultimate permission slip? So this is a fun little mind exercise. Recently, I came across some words from a modern day sage, Xavier Dagba, that stopped me in my tracks. He wrote, "The most courageous people I know have a high tolerance to disillusionment. They do the best they can to remain open to a higher truth, especially when it might disillusion them and shatter everything they thought they knew." That's the kind of courage these times demand. And I thought, that's it. That's what we're really talking about when we discuss courageous pivots. It's not just about making big changes. It's about being willing to have your illusions lovingly dismantled in service of something truer, something more real or more in alignment. Even if those illusions are about yourself, who you are, what you believe to be true, and what is in alignment for you. In this sense, then, what does disillusionment really mean? Well, it simply means the removal of illusion. You could have figured that one out yourself, but let me go deeper. When you think about it, the removal of illusion, it's the gentle peeling away of what was never actually real. When you think about it that way, it becomes sacred work. An illusion, by definition, is something that appears real, but isn't. The story we've been telling ourselves often for years about how things are supposed to be, about who we're supposed to be, about what success should look like, about what makes us worthy, what makes us a good person or an ally, a term we commonly hear. Here's what I've learned through my own pivots. Most of the suffering in our lives comes not from reality itself, but from the gap between reality and our illusions about how reality should be. When I was building my business, I had a beautiful illusion that if I just worked hard enough, created enough value, and helped enough people, I would feel permanently fulfilled. That success would equal satisfaction. That growth would equal joy. And for a while, that illusion served me. It kept me motivated, focused, driven, and I was truly happy. But eventually, reality whispered a different truth. I had changed. My values had shifted. What once brought me alive now felt heavy. How I wanted to work didn't align with what would actually work for the company I had founded. The identity I'd built was no longer who I authentically was. The disillusionment was tough to face, not because I'd failed, but because I had to let go of a story that had defined me for 15 years. I had changed my mind, or rather, my mind had caught up with my heart. As I also talked about in my interview with Sean Croxton, he talks about how successful entrepreneurs have to have an open mind and have to keep changing their mind. But here's what's beautiful about disillusionment when you approach it with courage. On the other side of every dissolved illusion is a deeper truth, a more authentic way of being, a clearer view of what actually matters. And in comes the courage to dare to question everything. One of the most courageous things you can do is develop a little sacred skepticism toward your own beliefs about how your life should look, how your work should look, what your relationship should be, what is true and what is not true. This isn't cynicism. You'd approach it with a sense of curiosity. It's the willingness to ask. This is not easy, as many of you know, for we live in times when asking too many questions can easily have you labeled and aligned in ways that aren't actually real or true. But that's the work. We brave asking anyway because the call to do so can't be quieted. The first act of courage as it relates to a courageous pivot is to simply ask these questions of yourself. What if the path I thought I wanted isn't actually mine? It's that idea of daring to dream someone else's dream because it looks so alluring, even if it's not right for you. What if the definition of success I've been chasing belongs to someone else? What if the version of me that others expect isn't who I really am anymore? And what if the thing I've been afraid to lose is exactly what I need to release? These questions can be terrifying because they threaten the very foundation we've built our lives on. But they're also liberating because they open up space for something more authentic to emerge. And it lands us here at the revolutionary act of changing your mind. Here's something we don't talk about enough. There is incredible power in allowing your mind to change. In our culture, we often treat changing your mind as weakness, as being wishy-washy, unreliable, or lacking conviction. We admire people who stick to their guns and never give up, that tenacity. But what if the ability to change your mind, to genuinely evolve your perspective when presented with new information or experiences, is actually one of the most sophisticated skills you can develop? What if changing your mind is the only way to truly evolve to higher levels of awareness and get closer to the truth of yourself and of the world? This work is holistic. It's never just about you. So think about it. Your brain is wired with something called confirmation bias. This means you naturally will seek out information that confirms what you already believe, and so you unconsciously, or maybe even consciously, filter out or dismiss information that challenges your existing worldview. Imagine now if that information isn't about the latest health headline or global event, but about yourself, the core of who you are. The function of confirmation bias served our ancestors well when quick decisions meant survival. But in our complex modern world, this same wiring can keep us trapped in outdated beliefs long after they've stopped serving us. The person who built my business 15 years ago was operating with a certain set of beliefs about success, fulfillment, and what it meant to live a meaningful life. That person wanted to be on covers of books and on TV and build a big business. Those beliefs were true for her at that time with the information and experience she had in the times she was living in. But today, I'm not that person. I'm not the same person I was 15 years ago. And the world has also changed in massive ways. I've gathered new data about myself, about what actually brings me joy, about what kind of impact I want to have in the world now, and how I view the world. That has changed dramatically. The courageous thing wasn't to stubbornly stick to my original plan because I'd already invested so much in it. And we talk about the sunk cost fallacy in an upcoming episode. The courageous thing was to allow new information to alter my view, even when it meant admitting to myself that my previous certainties might have been incomplete. This is the power of intellectual humility, the recognition that our understanding is always evolving and that being open to changing our minds isn't a sign of weakness, but of wisdom, of bravery, of strength, and of self-awareness. When you develop this skill, this willingness to let new information reshape your perspective, you become incredibly adaptable. You stop wasting energy defending positions that no longer serve you. You become curious rather than defensive when your beliefs are challenged. And most importantly, for our purposes here, you become available for the whispers of change. Because if you're too invested in being right about how your life should look, you might miss the subtle signals that it's time to pivot. I think about my own disillusionment with the entrepreneurship hustle culture, which I'd never fully subscribed to anyway. But it's the illusion that busy equals important, that growth at all costs equals success, that if you're not expanding, you're dying. And if you're not telling everyone about it all, or at least the highlights on social media, is it even worth doing, being, or achieving? When I got to a place where I began to question my own growth plans within my company, really question it, I discovered that some of my happiest, most creative moments happened when I was doing less, not more. When I was present, not productive, when I was being, not becoming. That realization required me to become disillusioned with ideas I'd held sacred for decades. This was long before I started a company. This was an achievement belief I'd held since childhood. More was more until enough was enough. That's when the foundation gets shaken. Disillusionment often feels like an earthquake in your life. Suddenly, things you thought were solid, your career identity, your relationship dynamics, your life goals, your beliefs around past decisions, the way you view the world or politics or your views on global events, it all starts to feel shaky. One of the scariest things is that with new insight, you might be forced to confront decisions of the past and also the results or repercussions of those decisions. This alone can keep people from daring to question anything. But at what cost? Well, I'll tell you. The cost is ultimately the infinite potential of the present and the future. This can be deeply unsettling. Again, we're wired to seek certainty, to create narratives that help us feel safe and in control. But what if the shaking isn't a sign that something's wrong? What if it's a sign that you're ready for something more real? So here's my question. What belief are you holding on to not because it serves you, but because letting go might be too disruptive? The thing you're most afraid to lose is often the very thing keeping you from who you're meant to become. It's important to distinguish between healthy disillusionment and toxic disappointment. Here's the difference. Disappointment says, this didn't turn out the way I wanted, and that's terrible. Disillusionment says, this didn't turn out the way I expected, and maybe that's showing me something important. Disappointment keeps us stuck in the story of how things should be. It feels heavy, bitter, and closed off. Where disillusionment invites us to question whether our shoulds are actually serving us. While sometimes painful, disillusionment can ultimately feel expansive. It creates space for new possibilities, space for big and powerful questions. When I look back at my business pivot, I can see both energies at play. There was disappointment for sure, grief over the identity I was releasing, sadness about letting my team go, confusion about who I was without the work that had defined me. But underneath, there was a deeper current of unknown possibility that felt wildly liberating. The recognition that the story I'd been living, that my worth was tied to my productivity, that success meant playing the part that had brought me so much joy and success in the past, wasn't actually true. That disillusionment opened up space for a different way of being, one where success could be defined by alignment rather than achievement, where rest wasn't laziness but wisdom, and where, quite honestly, I stopped getting my hair cut and straightening it. As I record this, it is, again, a squillion degrees and 100% humidity, and I am a proud frizzball in the hair department. So how do we cultivate this courage to be disillusioned? How do we develop a high tolerance for having our certainties lovingly dismantled over and over and over again? Well, here are 5 experiments you can try, and I recommend choosing at least 2, and do them for real. Don't just say you will. If you're serious about wanting ease to come into your life, whether it's with big change or micro pivots, you do have to do the work to shift your mind and get into your heart. So we can start with a really simple one that feels good. It's the sacred pause practice. Once a week, set aside 30 minutes. 30. I know you have it because I see your iPhone usage. Set aside 30 minutes to sit quietly with a belief you hold strongly about how your life should be. It could be about your career, your relationships, your health, your role as a parent, anything that feels solid and unquestionable. Then ask yourself, what if this belief isn't serving me anymore? What if there's another way to see it? Don't try to answer immediately, just sit with the question. Let it marinate. Notice what feelings come up: fear, relief, curiosity, resistance. All of these responses are just information as you begin this questioning process. Another experiment is the story audit. Write down 3 stories you tell about yourself regularly. Maybe it's, I'm not creative, I don't know how to cook, or I can't cook, I need to have it all figured out by now, or I can't afford to take risks. If you can't think of it, ask your partner, parent, or best friend. They'll likely have a laundry list for you. Don't take it personally. It's just how life goes. For each story, ask, where did this story come from? Who taught me that this was true? How is this story serving me? How might this story be limiting me? And what would be possible if this story wasn't true? This isn't about judging yourself for having these stories. We all have them. It's about getting curious about whether they're still accurate. The third is the opposite day experiment. Choose one day a week to do something that goes against your usual patterns or beliefs about yourself. If you always say yes to requests, practice saying no. If you never rest during the day, take a 20-minute nap. If you think you're not a creative person, spend an hour drawing or writing. And if an hour seems too long, set a timer for 10 minutes. Write for 10 minutes. Pay attention to what happens. Often we discover that our limitations are more flexible than we thought. Now, this is a fun one. Number 4 is the wisdom council practice. Identify 3 people whose life choices you previously judged or dismissed. Maybe it's someone who left a, quote, good job to travel the world, or someone who chose family over career advancement, or someone who changed directions later in life. Maybe it's someone who votes differently than you politically, or made a different medical choice than you would have made. Instead of judgment, get curious. What might they know that you don't? What wisdom might be hidden in choices that look wrong from the outsider to you? You don't have to adopt their path, but practicing this kind of curiosity can help dissolve rigid ideas about the right way to live. And 5, the future self dialogue. Imagine yourself 10 years from now having lived authentically and courageously. Write a letter from that future self to your current self. What would that person tell you about the beliefs you're holding too tightly? What illusions would they lovingly help you release? What truths would they encourage you to embrace? This practice can help you access wisdom that transcends your current limitations and fears. And remember, there is a gift on the other side. It's not wrapped up with a bow that you get to unwrap and try on and spin in the mirror. It's a different kind of gift. This gift, choosing disillusionment, isn't about becoming cynical or giving up hope. It's about trading false hope for real possibility. That is a gift. Remember, the safety in the unknown. Getting to know who you are today is also part of this journey. When we cling to illusions about how life should be, how we should be, how others should be, we create suffering for ourselves. We spend enormous energy trying to force reality to match our expectations rather than working with what actually is. Mel Robbins has her let them theory that has blown up, which is exactly about this, releasing those illusions to how things should be. Just let them be. When we develop the courage to release those illusions, we create space for something more beautiful, alignment with what's actually true. For me, becoming disillusioned with the story that my worth was tied to my achievements opened up space for a deeper sense of value, one based on presence rather than productivity. Becoming disillusioned with the idea that I had to have everything figured out allowed me to embrace the beauty of not knowing, of being in process, of allowing life to unfold organically. Becoming disillusioned with the belief that successful people don't rest gave me permission to build spaciousness into my days, which ironically made me more creative and effective in the work I chose to do. Each disillusionment has been a gift, even when it was initially confronting, annoying, embarrassing, or downright painful. What we're doing here, you and me together, as we flow through this courageous pivot process, is building a different kind of strength. In a world that celebrates certainty and confidence, it takes a different kind of strength to say, I don't know, or maybe I was wrong, or I'm ready to see this differently. But this kind of strength, the strength to remain open, to question, to be disillusioned with grace, might be exactly what our times demand. We're living in an era of rapid change where the old ways of doing things are being questioned across every single domain of life. The people who will thrive are not necessarily those who have all the answers, who seem to have it figured out, but those who remain curious about the questions they're asking and what is being asked of them. Those who can hold their beliefs lightly enough to let them evolve. Those who can be disillusioned without becoming bitter over and over again. Those who can let old versions of themselves die to make room for who they're becoming. Those who can say, I was wrong. It turns out this isn't it anymore. Those are the people that will thrive in these times. So here's my invitation to you. What illusion might be ready to be lovingly released in your life? What story about how things should be might be creating more suffering than joy? What belief about yourself or your life might be ripe for sacred questioning? Again, like with the micro pivots, you don't have to blow up your entire existence. You don't have to make dramatic changes today or tomorrow, but maybe you can develop a little more tolerance for not knowing, a little more curiosity about what lies beyond your current certainties, a little more willingness to be surprised by who you're becoming, a willingness to say, I don't know, when someone asks you what's next. Because on the other side of every dissolved illusion is a deeper truth, a more authentic way of being, a clearer view of what actually matters. And that, my dear friends, is the sacred journey through disillusionment to what is real and true today. It just starts by asking questions, but more importantly, being brave enough to listen for, to seek out, and to uncover those answers. Thank you so much for joining me today. If this episode spoke to something in you, I'd be grateful if you shared it with someone who might be ready to question their own sacred certainties. Leave your thoughts on this episode on my Substack, where you can also find show notes, resources, and special offers for you, my listeners. Your reviews mean the world to me and help more people find their way to these conversations. I want to invite you to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss future episodes where we'll continue exploring what it really means to live courageously in an uncertain world. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and remember, the willingness to be disillusioned might just be the most courageous thing you can do. Because the truth is always worth it.